Right. First off, congratulations to ESCAP and of course Hamza Malik for that excellent presentation. Aside from highlighting the macroeconomic impacts of rising global temperatures, the survey also gauges the temperature of discourses on the climate change economy nexus. We need to assess readiness based on our risk exposure and coping capacity, resilience tactics and strategies that are in place, and collective commitments and action that we are party to. Still, it is very reassuring that we are seeing a largely resilient global economic performance as presented by Hams earlier. So let me elaborate more. So breaching the 1.5-degree target set forth in the Paris Agreement is but certain, with last year's global temperature reaching record heights. It is apparent that climate change mitigation is falling short globally, although long-term warming measured over decades remains below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The past 10 years are warmest on record, and warming appears to be accelerating. The socioeconomic impacts are greater than previous estimates, highlighting that this is a very concerning current and future scenario. It is also apparent, although Hamza measured earlier in his presentation, that indicators are unclear, climate change and its impacts are real and upon us. So experience is telling us that climate change is here, but we need to measure everything in terms of that climate change economy nexus. So that nexus was mentioned. Let me expound further by pointing to the climate disaster economic nexus, which relates to climate change-induced disasters and their economic impacts. So extreme weather and climate events lead to massive economic and human losses. Climate change is exacerbating the frequency and severity of natural disasters, leading to significant economic losses through damage to infrastructure, disruption of trade, and impacts on various industries, including our agriculture and fishery sectors. Again, macroeconomic impacts of climate change are multifaceted. The major identified risk drivers, not only for the Philippines, but globally, are economic structure, geographical exposure, and adaptive capacity. Our loss and damage estimates, which were highlighted during the past COP meeting, were estimated to be around 300 to 500 billion per year, reaching alarmingly around 20% of the collective GDPs globally. Almost 600 billion per year is needed by 2030 just to address such loss and damage estimates. Climate adaptation costs and disaster recovery exacerbate fiscal concerns. And of course, climate change also impact labor productivity. The long-term human and economic losses are much larger than immediate losses, further highlighting the need for climate action. So we cannot stress enough, impacts perceived, experienced, and projected are substantial and alarming, although a bit vague, as mentioned earlier by Hamza. So there is an urgent need for tailored mitigation and adaptation strategies. Investments in CCDRR, such as physical infrastructure improvements and risk transfer mechanisms, can yield multiple economic benefits beyond disaster mitigation. Short-term costs are offset by long-term gains toward avoiding losses, providing economic stimulus, and reducing volatility. We need to mitigate headwinds such as climate and disaster impacts, geopolitics, trade disruptions, demographic challenges, and capitalize on tailwinds, public spending and investment, digitalization and innovation, and the resurging economies after the pandemic. Okay, interestingly, Hamza presented earlier two slides that are both positive and a bit concerning, when it comes to our domestic outlook. So ESCAP 2025 survey showed that the Philippines is not among the more exposed and is considered to be with high coping ability. That's very positive. But the World Risk Report 2024 highlighted that the Philippines remains the most at-risk country globally for the 16th consecutive year, indicating highest exposure and vulnerability to natural disasters. So, well, we need to be more discerning about supposed perceptions and evidence through science. So enhancing our domestic CCDRR economy policy and action alignment is very much needed. How do we do this? We need to strengthen national and subnational institutions. We need to enhance method and tool acquisition and stakeholder retraining. We need to promote ownership of CCDRR plans and actions and address suboptimal funding facility and fund availment and use, particularly among local governments and affected communities. We need to promote complementation with private sector and CSOs and tap regional global cooperation platforms. Although such platforms, as mentioned by Hamza earlier, need to be further assessed in terms of optimality. Adapt to dynamic evolving methodologies and augment monitoring, evaluation, and reporting systems. Eventually, for those damaged by events, we need to optimize rehabilitation rebuilding. So I'm keeping this very short for further exchanges later. I'm going to close with this. Let us act with urgency and purpose toward mitigating climate change and its complex impacts, both at the global and domestic levels. With that, thank you.